Hey up everybody and welcome back. Right, well, as you saw from the title, we really are going to do the crankcase today. We'll put the crank in and then that will allow us to bolt the gearbox on the back, and then we'll put that bottom end in, because that's sort of the smallest amount of bottom end I can put together, because I'm getting old, you know, and these things are heavy. So we'll do that and then we'll start to build up the engine from there. So, as I mentioned, last week's video was a bit strange, but I got the pond dug finally. It was a little touch and go at the end because I was on sort of a last little bit of land to stand on with a ramp behind me, and in the end I decided this is a bit dodgy. I'm just going to make that the end of the pond. So that's all done. Actually, the hardest job was I had to clean it before it went back to the rental place, and it must take me nearly an hour and a half with a power washer, pressure washer, to get that clay off it. It was bloody awful, but of course it does make a good pond. Anyway, that's completely beside the point. Right, couple of things to mention. Hang on, got a bit of paper. See, I remembered my bit of paper today. As usual, I had lots of comments and lots of eagle-eyed viewers, and where is it? Patrick Coll. See, I remembered your name this time. Mentioned that when I did the gearbox, there should be a gasket between the inner case and the actual case. So there wasn't one when I stripped it, there wasn't one, or there isn't one on the other gearbox. I checked the parts box and there's no mention of a gasket. So I answered Patrick, and he very kindly sent the part number. So I plugged the part number into Hitchcock's, and sure enough, there's a gasket. Then I had a thought, and I looked at the parts books for the 90s bullets from Madras, and there's a gasket there. So just to be on the safe side, I phoned Hitchcock's this morning and they verified that the Redditch gearboxes didn't have a gasket, the Indian ones do. So that leads me on to something I want to mention. David Calton, who with his charming wife watches the videos, and whose screen name is not Wakadi Vid Dad Dooda something or other. It's actually David Calton backwards. But anyway, he mentioned when I said that I had most of my parts books on disc, he mentioned a chap whose name escapes me, who does one on disc, and he's here in the States, for the Enfield singles. And as it happens, I have that manual. Now here's another perfect example. In the part I'm building the engine up there, when you get the camshafts, he says to put the rear thrust washer on, put the camshaft in, put the front thrust washer on. Well, again, I checked this with Hitchcock's, and no, the Redditch bullets do not have thrust washers on either side of the camshaft. So this is just a little warning for anybody who's working on bullets. As another example, actually, I'm waffling on a bit, but if you do a Google search for Enfield bullet trials, you'll get a couple of hundred photographs, and only a handful of them are of the Redditch one, this bike. So nearly everything you look up for, same with YouTube, if you look up Enfield bullet rebuild, it's almost always the Madras Indian bullets, and they have some slight differences. So just a word of note there. Okay, before we get on to the work, I want to show you something. Right, just a slight change of camera angle, but I've put the different yokes in. Now, as I mentioned, I felt really lucky. They were 35mm, same with the forks. They weren't actually 7 inches apart, as the ones I had were. They were 7 1/4, but that was fine. That just meant an 1/8 inch spacer on one side, and the wheel spindle to go in a bit further from the other side, and the wheel central again. But what I really felt lucky on was the stem. The stem was identical. So I took the bearing races off the other stem, put them on, and it all went together in no time at all. So while I was doing that, I finished off another couple of jobs. Now, it was also noticed when I was putting all this together that there seemed to be a much bigger hole here than the bolt I used. That's because when I was doing it, I drilled this slightly off and I couldn't line up with the threaded portion behind here. And I wanted to get all this fitted so that I could take measurements and stuff, so I just enlarged the hole a little bit. Well, since then, because I had to move the wheel, I made a new plate. You remember this torque arm here that's bolted to the brake plate? So I made a new one with this part into it. You remember also I had to weld a piece on. So what I've done is I actually put this in the mill so that I could use an end mill rather than a drill, and I opened this out so it was nice and round, and then I've made a piece to go in, and the piece actually as well as being in this has the built-in spacer. So now, as you can see, it's all correct, and that just goes in there. Alright, so I sort of did everything that needed to be done here to finish off. You may notice I also machined a little bit off this. I didn't like the round bottom. Makes it look a bit better. So that's all finished. Oh, and I've just thought something else. Just to bring us back to what I was saying about Indian Enfields. When I got the new yokes, in order to facilitate a speedy changeover, I thought I'd buy some new bearing races for the headstock, the steering head. And rather than go to all the trouble of ordering from Hitchcock's, I just bought them off eBay. Now these were listed as bullet, but as you see, they don't have that tapered shape, and these will not fit this bullet, because the other thing about the Indian Enfields is they continued using the old frame right through until they started, sort of making their own frames. So if you buy an Enfield bullet, or well, they only made the bullets then, in the 90s, it's got the frame from the 40s and early 50s. It doesn't have the type of frame that we've got on the bullet here and we had on the Indian Trailblazer. So if you bought these to put on a Redditch Enfield, they wouldn't fit. Alright, we've laboured that enough. Let's get on with the engine. Now we're ready to try and put this crank in. So I've got a piece ready to be able to press that bearing in. Because of this coating, I'm not going to heat it up as much as I normally do, but what I have done is I've got the bearings in the freezer. They've been in there for a couple of days. So I'm going to put this in the oven, let it start warming up, and then while it's doing that, we'll put the crank in the other half. So let's move that oil can, sorry. If it'll fit in the oven. Just goes in. Door won't quite close. Right, so we're using our hole in the bench again. I've screwed in. Let me pull this on. I've screwed in the studs and I've put some bolts in because we're going to use them to pull this down. I noticed a couple of videos I've watched, and when I took the other engine apart, that these bearings aren't as tight as they are in some other engines. So anyway, we'll put that over the hole. Put some oil on this bearing. I've put new rollers in here. Can you see that? Yeah, just. I've put some new rollers in, and the new sort of thrust washers. The other one's already in there. That's that. Oh, and I've also, through the quill end here, I've pumped oil in and it's come out the big end, so I know everything is all right there. There we go. So that's in there. I see it doesn't even reach through the hole, so we're all right. So let's let that warm up for a couple of minutes, and I'll walk up and get the bearings from out of the freezer. Just thought I might as well put this this bearing on as well. Hang on, let me get that. That's got its thrust washer behind it as well, a new one in there. Okay, let me go and get those other bearings. You're making a mess there, Spot. Right, I've got everything ready. Let's get this out of the oven. I've already put the big washer in the bottom. I just had a heart attack. I've been rampaging around looking for this bearing. I thought I'd thrown it out with some rubbish I've just put out, and of course it was in the freezer. Okay, that goes on there, that goes on there, that goes on there. Okay, I could have had this down further, couldn't I? Hang on. Oh, I got a hydraulic leak. Time for a new jack. It's just moved out slightly. Another 300 job, so there we go. Okay, that's all the way in. Come on. That out, because now we have got to put the circlip in. Hey, this is hot. Bugger! Oh. Are you all smirking? Smiling and... The pins just aren't big enough to hold in this. Ow! I'm going to turn you off for a minute. I need a bigger pair of circlip pliers. I wonder if these will do. Well, I think that's alright, we just tap it in. Yep, that's in all the way around. Okay. I'll put these down ready to put in. I've thought I did. One outside spacer, one inside spacer. Actually, I don't need to put the inside spacer in yet because I'm only putting this in. Oh, that's warmer than I thought it was. There we go. Got it done. Alright, let's let that cool down. So the other half's cooled down. I've put the inner spacer there. We'll put plenty of oil on this bearing. And we'll put plenty of oil in the ball bearing. Come on. Which ones are we sticking on? Go. Now then. Oh, then the original nuts must be small ones. Okay. Let me tighten all the rest of these bolts up. Ooh, that feels good. And I'll bring you back. This one stud here must be screwed in further than usual on the other side because I can't get a full nut on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some Loctite on the nut, screw it in, and then we'll be able to unscrew the stud, and I'll see if any of the other studs I've got are a little bit longer. I say I'll put some Loctite on if I've got some Loctite. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. So that's going to go on there. And then that should unscrew and pull the stud out. Okay, so I've got it tightened up. I've got to find a bolt for the top there, but everything seems to be fine. That turns nicely. So look, see, we're getting dirty. That's what I wanted to get away from. I've put all the studs in here so we can slide the gearbox on. Then we're going to put it in the frame. All right. Once more, we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You saw that when I initially bolted up the crankcases, the crank turned fine. But when I got all the final bolts in, because the the 3 front crankcase bolts are actually the ones that go right through the engine plates. Tightened it up, it wouldn't turn. So I slackened them off a little bit, and what I found was that it would turn. I thought there was no problem. It just turned nicely, and then suddenly it tightened up, and it could just to say get it round, then it was free, and then. So I thought to myself, seems like the crank isn't true. So I've set it up here with a dial indicator, so you can see. That should only be a couple of thou. That's what I normally like to set them at. And as you can see, it's an awful lot. In fact, if we set that at 0, $50 thou. No wonder it had a tight spot. Alright, so I'll do a little drawing now to explain to you how this works, and I'll show you the little setup I've got here as well. Just to show you the setup, the crank is in between 2 centres. You could use a centre in the taper, but I don't have a centre to fit that, so I turned up one and made sure that these are exactly right. And what I did actually, before I even put the crank in, was I checked that both of these right here, see I turned a little flat on, well, a little collar onto it so I could check it. So that and that are running exactly true. So when I put the flywheels in, I knew that any out of trueness was in them, not in these centres. Okay, so let's get on with the flywheels. Now, there are several ways the crank can be out of true, but we're going to look at the 2 commonest ones. And in fact, there are 2 ways, but what you can have is various combinations of the 2. So the first one is when you have there's a crank pin that the big end's going to be on, and the flywheels, or the webs I should say, are like that. They're spread at the bottom. So because the crankshaft itself is at right angles to these, they're going to stick up like that. Now, obviously, other than that, you can have it where there's your crank pin and they go inwards. Obviously, this is vastly exaggerated, in which case the crankshaft goes down. So what we do is we mount it, as you saw in the lathe, at each end, and we spin it. Now when it's like this, of course, this is going to rotate like that, so it's going to go up and down and up and down, and that is going to be at its lowest when the crank pin is at the top. This one is going to be at its lowest when the crank pin's at the bottom, or I should say it's going to be at its highest when the crank pin's at the top, right? Because you're going to have your meter reading on there. In this instance, you would pinch these together, put them in the vise or a clamp, something like that, bring them in and get this to be a straight line again. There you'd either drive a wedge in, or if you've got some sort of little spreading device, you can put that in there and you open them out, because obviously, pardon me, you can't pinch it here. Now the other thing that can happen is that the 2 flywheels get out of line. So, sort of almost a side view, there's our crank pin. There's one flywheel. And the other one, instead of being right there, is in actual fact out here. So looking at it from the top, there's the crank pin. One is like that, and again I'm exaggerating this, and one is like that. So here when you spin it, as that one comes round, that one's high, and then that will go down as this one comes up. So let's have a look and see what situation we've got, and then I'll explain how we're going to deal with each one. Now there is another way to check on the situation where these flywheels are out of line, and that's with a square. Now these actually slope inwards, so you're not going to get it flat, but obviously this edge should be the same height as that edge. So if you come down, it's touching there, we've got a gap here. That's virtually spot on. Whoops, now we're touching here and we've got a gap there. Nice and square. And there again we're touching on the left and we've got a gap on the right. So we know these are out that way. So what you have to do in this instance is you find out which side is furthest out and you're going to knock that back in. So I think we'll start by doing that, seeing as we know what's what. So I'm going to work my way around again and see which way they need to go. Now this of course is not as accurate a way of doing it with the indicator, but we'll come to that for the fine tuning. But the handy thing about this, and the reason I always do it first, is you can do it on the bench. I can give this a whop and then I can get that and check it, and when I think I'm sort of about there, I can put it back in the either in the lathe, or you could put it on those disc things, any sort of stand that's nice and level. So in this instance I've marked it, this disc wants to come in this way. So this is the bit where if you work for customers, you don't want them to be around, because they're not going to understand why you're getting a big brass hammer or something and doing that to it. So now I'm going to check it again. That's better than it was. That's basically it. I'll put it back in the lathe because you can see it better against the white background. So I've been bumping this about. So we'll come down here nice and flat. Touching both sides. As you can see, we're still slightly out there with, so they're a little bit skewed. But let's see what it looks like with the indicator on. Now remember, we were bouncing around 50 thou. That's going from 10 to 35, so there's half of it gone in that. So let's see what we've got here. There we are with it at the top. Okay, so this is low. If you remember from the drawings, if that's low, that means it's down like this. So we've actually got to open these webs out to bring that up. So let's find a suitable wedge and we'll see about opening this up. Now you don't want to damage these, of course, when you're putting a wedge in, so you really should use a soft wedge. Brass one is good. If you haven't got a soft wedge, then get yourself a nice big chisel and just put a bit of aluminium on it. So we're going to drive that into there. Now the other thing is, this springs a bit. It's like when you're bending a piece of tube or something. You bend it like straightening fork tubes, stanchions. You think you've, you start to bend it and you see it go down, and then when you take the press off, it goes back up. So you nearly always over bend them. So what I like to do is just make a mark where I'm going to put the wedge in. Just take a quick measurement. And then after I've knocked the wedge in, I can check it again. And so that's 695. So we'll open it just a couple of thou. Okay, we've opened it 8 thou, which is maybe a little bit more than I wanted, but so now we'll put this back in and check it again. Now that only moved it a couple of thou, so I'll keep doing this because you don't want to watch me in, out, and when I've got it right, I'll bring you back. Alright, I've wedged and bumped and just done the things you've seen, going backwards and forwards. 2 thou. And when you get down here, this really is one of those diminishing return things. You might bump it, get it to 1 thou, you bump it again and it's gone 5 the other way. So if you can get to a couple of thou on an old crank like this, that's very good. The other thing to mention is, if you do it in one of the balancing things with the little discs, that's fine. If you do it in a lathe, or if you do it in one of the bench stands where you wind the end in, be careful you just take the end in, because there's a lot of power in a screw. You can push it back in. So let's have a look at the other side. Right, this side is about 3.5, and to be honest, on an old crank like this, I'm happy with that. 2 on one side, 3.5, maybe 4 on the other side. Considering we went from 50 on this side down to 2, I think we're in really good shape. Now when I split the crankcases, I did it this way. I took this off and just laid it down. I never actually looked at it, so I've just turned this over to clean off the old gasket cement. Look, flywheel was rubbing just there, and that's because they were out. Crank wasn't running true, so the flywheel was giving it this, so that's why it was fine all the way around, and then it wobbled over that side, caught like that. Can you see that? Yeah. Alright, so now we can put that back together and keep our fingers crossed. Now then, I've got all the case bolts in. I've also put the engine plates on, so those first 3 bolts are in. So we're all set. That's as tight as this gets bolted up. There we go. Very nice, all the way around. So, at last, success. Now then, I had hoped to get this built up to the head today, but you know, we had a couple of setbacks. So for next week, we'll put the drive pinion on here and the little worm drive for the oil pump, put the camshafts in, these studs, put the piston on, put the barrel on, push rods in, cylinder head on. And of course, I'll do that after it's all in the frame. We'll put the gearbox on and put it in the frame, because as I say, this is already getting to be reasonably heavy. So we'll manhandle it in and then we'll build up all the top from there. So that's it for this week. Until next week, you go off and enjoy yourselves.